A single dad rents a room to a crying homeless girl not knowing she's a millionaire CEO's daughter. I'm not asking for a handout, I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. Luke froze mid-step, rain dripping from the brim of his worn baseball cap, his boots squelching softly on the wooden porch of the weather-beaten house he'd called home for 5 years. The voice, soft and shaky yet clinging to a quiet dignity, emerged from the shadows. He turned toward it, seeing a young woman, perhaps 22, curled up beneath the porch overhang, completely soaked through. Blonde hair clung to her cheeks, and she hugged a scuffed black suitcase tightly trembling, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, perhaps fear or sheer exhaustion. "Are you lost?" Luke asked cautiously. She shook her head. "No, I saw the sign in your window about the room." He followed her gaze to the faded sheet taped inside, "Room for rent $100. Inquire within." He had put it up just last week, having realized Jacob needed new shoes and the fridge was nearly empty again. "I've got cash," she quickly added, pulling out a wad of damp bills. $200 all of it. I can pay for the first month now." Luke glanced at the money, then back at her. She looked utterly out of place, not quite homeless, yet clearly not okay either. Her clothes were soaked, but not ragged. Jeans clung to her legs like a second skin, and her thin sweater had a small tear at the elbow. Her boots were worn but solid, suggesting she was someone who had possessed something until very recently. "Got a name?" he asked. "Claire," she said. "Just Claire." Luke scratched the back of his neck, his breath fogging in the cold. Behind the door the heater hummed, and Jacob would likely be finishing his apple slices, nodding off in front of the old TV. He looked at her again, her wide eyes drenched clearly, trying hard not to cry. "All right," he said, stepping aside and unlocking the door. "Come on in." She blinked. "Really?" "Yeah, but leave your shoes by the door. The floors creak. And try not to wake the kid." Claire stood slowly lifting the suitcase. She winced, either from pain or cold he couldn't tell, and stepped inside as if crossing into sacred ground, the faint scent of rain and something floral following her. Luke flipped on the hallway light, revealing a modest house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, hardwood floors, and thrift store furniture. It was clean and clearly lived in. He led her down the hall. "This is your room," he said. "It's small, but the bed's good, and the sheets are clean." Claire stepped in, still clutching the suitcase. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "The bathroom's down the hall and the kitchen's yours to use. Just label your stuff in the fridge." She nodded. "I've got a 6-year-old, he added. "Jacob a good kid. I don't bring strangers around much." "I won't be any trouble, I swear," she replied. Luke studied her, noting no desperation in her tone, just a steady, quiet resolve. "All right," he said. "We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. You need towels." "I'll manage," she replied quickly. He gave her a look, then returned with a folded towel and an extra blanket. She took them, hesitating slightly as her eyes grew glassy. "I mean it. Thank you." Luke nodded. "Night, Claire." After he left, she lingered in the doorway, staring down the dim hallway, then closed the door gently and exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for days. In the kitchen, Luke poured himself a glass of water, gazing out the rain-streaked window. He knew he should have asked more questions, checked her ID, but something about her felt undeniably honest. He glanced at the fridge where a magnet held up one of Jacob's crayon drawings, a crooked house with 3 stick figures beneath a smiling sun. 3. Luke blinked, then shook his head and took a sip, acknowledging that sometimes people just need a chance. And sometimes the ones who show up on your porch in the rain are the ones who end up changing everything. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and the ground soft. Light filtered through the faded curtains of the small house, casting a soft glow on the floorboards. Claire's door was still closed when Luke passed by with a mug of coffee. In the living room, Jacob sat cross-legged on the rug with his favorite toy truck missing wheels but still beloved. "Hey, buddy," Luke said. "Sleep okay?" Jacob nodded. I heard someone come in last night. Luke paused. Yeah, her name's Claire. She's staying in the guest room for a while. Jacob's eyes lit up. Is she nice? She seemed polite. Just then, Claire's door creaked open. She stepped out slowly, blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, wearing the same clothes as the night before, now clean and dry, and carrying the folded blanket and towel. Good morning, she said gently. I washed these. You didn't have to, Luke replied. I know. Jacob peered from behind Luke. Claire smiled and crouched to meet his eye level. You must be Jacob. I'm 6, he said proudly. Well, 6 is a great age, she replied. I was 6 once, too. He laughed, a sound that made Luke feel a little less tired. Claire settled in without fuss, neither taking up space nor making noise. Her room stayed impeccably neat, bed-made desk, organized with precision. At first, Luke thought she was afraid of being kicked out, but it soon became clear that this was simply her nature. She washed dishes without being asked, wiped counters, and took out the trash. When Luke came home late, the kitchen light would still be on a plate in the fridge, accompanied by a sticky note that read, "Eat before you fall over." Jacob adored her. At first he called her Miss Claire, but that didn't last long. One evening she helped him fold paper cranes, her fingers moving with quiet grace, forming perfect shapes. You're good at that, Luke said from the doorway. Claire smiled. I had a lot of time alone growing up. Folding paper was quieter than talking. That night she read from The Secret Garden, a book Luke didn't know was still in the house, her voice calm and rhythmic, as if she had read it 100 times, even doing just enough voices to make Jacob giggle. Later, after Jacob went to bed, Luke rinsed dishes while Claire dried. You don't talk about your past, he observed. Claire looked up, then back down. Not much to talk about. Luke didn't press, but he noticed things, her hands steady and refined, like someone who once took ballet or piano, the way she always crossed her ankles when she sat, her polite, measured, and graceful posture and speech. Then there were the details. She used a small jar of hand cream, its label worn off, but the almond and orchid scent was unmistakably expensive. Her phone was older, but its handy-stitched, monogrammed leather case, though faded, spoke of quality. No makeup, no jewelry. Yet her toothbrush was imported, and her shampoo, rosemary and vetiver, was the kind found in luxury hotels. And her words, she helped Jacob with a school project using phrases like narrative structure and thematic resonance, correcting his spelling with gentle precision. One afternoon, Luke passed her room and heard classical music, Vivaldi perhaps, or Debussy, something he couldn't name, but felt all the same. It didn't add up. Claire never said where she came from or why she'd ended up on his porch, but Luke was a mechanic. He knew when something didn't fit. She spoke like someone raised in a house with chandeliers, yet moved like someone who had fallen far and was quietly trying to rise again. He didn't ask. People had stories, and she'd tell hers when she was ready. Meanwhile, she was helping Jacob laugh again and helping Luke breathe easier just by being there. Sometimes Luke would come home late to find her and Jacob asleep on the couch, curled under the same blanket, a book half finished on Claire's chest. He'd smile, then not with amusement, but with something warmer, something real. Maybe it wasn't forever, but for now it felt like something beginning. It happened on a Tuesday evening just after sunset. Luke had come home early from the garage, a rare break in his routine to find the house quiet. Jacob was already in bed, a line of paper cranes strung across the headboard from Claire's latest craft project. Claire was in the kitchen barefoot, humming something under her breath as she dried the dishes. Faint jazz playing warmly and low on the radio. As she moved to put away the last plate, something slipped from her sweater pocket and landed on the floor with a soft clink. Luke bent to pick it up, already reaching out before she noticed. "I'm sorry, that's..." She started, but her voice caught. It was a small silver locket, delicate and ornate. He opened it gently, unsure why. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, a man and a woman smiling, dressed in expensive formal wear. The woman had Claire's same sea glass eyes, the same smile. Luke turned the locket over in his palm. There was an inscription etched in gold on the back, "To Claire, love Dad." But just beneath that, a name, W.R. Montgomery. The name landed like a stone in Luke's chest, William R. Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Properties. The same man whose photo appeared on every billboard in the state, smiling in crisp suits with slogans like "Building the Future, Buying the Past." The same man whose company had bought out half the county, bulldozed neighborhoods, and turned affordable homes into luxury condos no one here could afford. The same man who months ago had pulled funding from a community shelter Jacob and his late wife once volunteered at. Claire's eyes widened when she saw what Luke was holding. "Please," she said, her voice cracking, "just give it back." Luke handed it over without a word. She took it and disappeared down the hallway. That night he could not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, his old laptop open in front of him, the screen glowing in the dark like a quiet confession. He typed Claire Montgomery into the search bar and scrolled through dozens of images. Red carpet events, charity galas, vacation photos on private beaches. And there she was, smaller, younger hair, shorter eyes, brighter, posing beside her father in front of a marble fireplace. The caption read, "CEO William Montgomery, with daughter Claire at the governor's gala." Luke leaned back, hand over his mouth. So it was true. She had not just wandered onto his porch one rainy night. She had walked away from a life of unimaginable wealth, power, and influence. And here she was, folding laundry in his living room, teaching his son how to fold cranes, cleaning floors, cooking dinner, sleeping in a room that leaked when it rained. He could have asked questions, demanded answers, or told her to leave, but he didn't. Instead, he opened the spice cabinet, pulled out cinnamon and sugar, and started making dough. The next morning, Claire woke to the smell of baking bread. She padded into the kitchen, her oversized hoodie slipping off one shoulder, and stopped when she saw the plate waiting for her, still warm, the crust, golden steam rising gently. Beside it, a ceramic mug filled with honey, a sweetened tea, and a note written in Luke's steady, clumsy handwriting on a piece of brown paper towel. The note read, "In this house, if a daughter needs a father, even for just a few days, I can try to fill the part, no questions asked." Claire stood still for a long moment, holding the paper. Then she sat down, tore off a corner of the bread, and ate it slowly, quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks and disappearing into her lap. Upstairs, Jacob stirred awake, calling her name. She wiped her eyes, folded the note gently, and tucked it into the pocket of her hoodie right next to the locket. That morning, she didn't run. She stayed. The house was quiet again. 3 days had passed since the locket incident, and though Claire and Luke continued their routines as if nothing had happened, something had profoundly shifted. Claire no longer avoided his eyes, and Luke no longer questioned the elegant details that didn't match her supposed story. It was Jacob who finally bridged the silence. One rainy afternoon, he came home muddy and frustrated because another boy had made fun of his shoes. Claire knelt down to untie his laces, wiping the grime from his ankles with a warm towel. Her voice was soft but firm. "You're not what you wear, Jacob. You're what you do for others." He looked up. "Is that what your dad told you?" She hesitated, freezing for just a second, then quietly replied, "No, it's what he forgot." That night, while Jacob slept curled up with a paper crane in one hand, Claire sat at the kitchen table long after Luke had finished the dishes. She nursed a mug of lukewarm tea and stared out the window as if weighing whether the storm outside was worth walking into. Finally, she spoke. "You know who I am now, don't you?" Luke sat across from her, neither nodding nor denying it. Claire looked down at the mug in her hands. "My father is William Montgomery," she said, "CEO of Montgomery Properties, maybe the wealthiest man in the state." Luke stayed quiet. "He just announced the cancellation of a housing project in East Briarwood," she continued, her voice cracking. "You've probably heard. Families were counting on it, but they're not just numbers to me. My mother used to teach their volunteer literacy classes at the Briarwood Community Center. She loved that place, said it reminded her of the life she could have had, the one she gave up when she married him. Luke leaned back, arms crossed, listening. Claire took a breath. I found out he was going to demolish the whole area, not just the project, but the center too, for another luxury development, gated townhomes. He didn't even hesitate. She swallowed. I confronted him. Said I'd tell the press, the board, whoever would listen. He laughed. Her hand gripped the mug tighter. He said, no one listens to a girl who's never worked a day in her life. Then told me, if I wanted to see the world, I could go play poor. She looked up, eyes bright with something between fury and heartbreak. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. I left that night, took what I could fit in a suitcase, got rained on, lost my wallet, and found your porch. Luke studied her. You haven't talked to him since... Claire shook her head. I don't want his money or his name. I just want to live a real life with real people. Luke rubbed his jaw. And this is real to you. Claire's eyes softened. You didn't ask questions. You gave me bread and tea. Jacob smiles in his sleep again. I haven't heard laughter in a house in years. She paused. You fixed more in a week than my father did with $1 billion. Luke looked down, flushing slightly. I don't need much, she added. Just a place where I don't have to pretend, where kindness isn't transactional. She glanced around at the cracked tile flickering light bulb and the scent of cinnamon clinging to the air. It's not a mansion, she said, but it's the first place that's ever felt like home. They sat in silence after that. Outside, the storm rolled on, steady and relentless. But inside, something had settled, not peace, but maybe understanding, a quiet truce between two people, carrying more than they ever meant to, choosing finally not to carry it alone. It was just after 9 when headlights swept across the front window. Claire saw them first. She was drying a plate in the kitchen while Luke stood at the stove flipping grilled cheese sandwiches for a late dinner. Jacob was already upstairs fast asleep, a crumpled soccer jersey still in hand. She froze hand mid-motion to her mouth. Luke turned. You okay? But Claire didn't respond. She moved to the window. Across the street, a black SUV had pulled up, tinted windows, engine idling. Definitely not a neighborhood car. The driver's door opened and a tall, tailored man stepped out, clipboard in hand. His coat was too pressed for the muddy curb, his hair-slicked shoes polished to a mirror shine. The kind of man who didn't knock, he announced. Stay here, Claire said under her breath. Yeah, that's not happening, Luke muttered, already heading for the door. The knock came sharp and confident. Luke cracked it open, blocking the view behind him. Evening, the man said. I'm looking for Claire Montgomery. Luke braced his arm on the frame. And who might you be? The man flipped open a leather wallet, revealing a sleek ID. Thomas Langley, executive aide to Mr. William Montgomery. I'm here to escort Miss Montgomery home. Claire stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. I'm not going anywhere. Langley's eyes locked on hers. Claire, this detour has gone on long enough. Your father's ready to move past it, but it's time to return. There are expectations. She crossed her arms. Tell him I'm done living for his expectations. Langley's jaw twitched. Then you leave me no choice but to contact authorities. You're listed as missing. Technically, this could qualify as unlawful harboring. She's not missing, Luke said calmly. She's right here voluntarily. Langley narrowed his eyes. And you are. Luke Bennett, landlord, father, the guy whose kitchen smells like grilled cheese. Also the guy you're not intimidating tonight. Claire stepped forward. Luke. But Luke held his ground, his voice low and steady. You think you can show up, flash a title, and drag her back like she's some runaway socialite? Not going to happen. Langley's tone cooled. This is a family matter. No, Luke shot back. This is a control matter. She walked away from a name, and you all can't stand that she didn't come crawling back. Claire's breath hitched. Langley tried one last time. Let me be clear. But Luke stepped onto the porch, rain misting his flannel shirt. No, let me be clear. He looked Langley dead in the eyes. She doesn't need a mansion or gold-plated initials. She needs safety, respect, a place where no one measures her by her last name. He took another step forward. She doesn't need a palace. She needs to be a person." Langley faltered just slightly. Luke's voice dropped. "She's home here, and unless you've got a court order or the guts to come back without hiding behind your boss's name, I suggest you walk away." Silence. Langley adjusted his cuffs. "This isn't over." "I know," Claire said. "That's why he's afraid." Langley turned, walked to the SUV, and drove off. Luke stood there, damp, breathing deep. Inside, Claire watched him stunned. He stepped in and closed the door. "Hope you still want grilled cheese," he said, trying for lightness, but his voice cracked. Something had shifted. Claire let out a breath, half laugh, half sob. "I do," she whispered. They ate in silence, steam rising the house warm despite the storm. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside a line had been drawn not with threats, but with presence. Claire had been defended before by lawyers' assistant security, but this was different. Tonight, she was defended by someone who saw her. Not her name, not out of duty, but because she mattered not to a legacy, but to him. The first article dropped on a Wednesday. Not front page, not yet, but it spread fast. Montgomery Properties accused of forcing out low-income families for profit. The story exposed rezoning manipulation, quiet title acquisitions, and shady permits that led to the destruction of Briarwood's community center and public housing. But it didn't name Claire. Not yet. At the kitchen table, she watched the report play on the old TV above the fridge. Her face was calm, but her fingers trembled around her coffee mug. Luke had once gently asked her if she was sure. She had nodded. "I've lived behind walls long enough," she had said. "It's time someone let the truth in." It took her 3 nights to collect everything: emails, reports, memos. She used Luke's laptop to encrypt and send it to an investigative journalist she trusted. Luke never asked for details. He just left her tea and silence. But that silence didn't last. By Friday, reporters were calling, then showing up. Neighbors peeked through blinds, cars slowed outside the house, and a camera crew even knocked while Jacob ate cereal in his dinosaur pajamas. Claire apologized over and over. Luke only said, "You did the right thing. The rest is just noise." But the noise kept growing. A week later, a black town car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a messenger this time. It was him. Claire spotted her father through the kitchen window. William Montgomery in a perfectly pressed suit, silver cufflinks gleaming. His presence was commanding even from across the street. Luke opened the door before he could knock. Montgomery didn't smile. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I believe we've become entangled." Luke remained silent. "I came to make this simple," he continued, holding out a thick, sealed envelope. "There's enough here to make this go away." Luke didn't touch it. Montgomery's voice tightened. "You're a father. You know what it means to protect your child." Luke stepped forward, quiet but firm. "So do you." He paused. "But it looks like we have different definitions of what a child really needs." Montgomery's expression cracked just slightly. Luke shut the door without another word. That evening, Jacob biked home from school like always. Claire was in the front yard pulling weeds, and Luke worked on the porch siding. None of them saw the black sedan until it was too late. The driver, distracted by his phone, drifted too close to the sidewalk. Jacob swerved, lost control, hit the curb hard, and the bike flipped. He landed with a sickening thud. Claire screamed. Luke dropped his tools and ran, but Claire was already there. She scooped Jacob into her arms. His head lolled against her shoulder, blood trickling from a gash above his eye, and one arm hung limp and twisted. He was conscious but dazed. The sky opened up with sudden rain as she bolted into the street, barefoot and soaked. A neighbor saw them and threw open a car door. Claire sat with Jacob in the back seat the entire ride, whispering, "You're okay. I've got you. I've got you." At the hospital, she wouldn't let go of him. Not for the nurse, not for anyone. When doctors finally wheeled Jacob away, Claire collapsed outside the ER doors, her knees hitting the tile with a dull, echoing thud. She didn't cry out. She folded her hands, lowered her forehead, and shook in silence, as if praying, pleading, or simply breaking. Luke found her minutes later drenched and pale. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Behind the closed doors, machines beeped steadily. Jacob would be okay, a fractured arm, mild concussion, no internal damage. But something deeper had cracked that night. Not Jacob's bones, not just Claire's heart, but something bigger. The illusion that they could stay invisible forever. Because now the fight between truth and power wasn't just a headline anymore. It had come to their street, to their doorstep, and it had nearly taken their child. The news broke 3 days after Jacob was discharged from the hospital. Claire had barely slept, staying at his bedside each night, curled in the recliner with knees tucked beneath a blanket. Luke watched her from the doorway more than once, struck not by the grief in her eyes, but by the fierce protectiveness, the kind that can't be bought or taught, only earned. Then the world shifted. Local headlines became national within hours. Whistleblower exposes massive housing displacement scheme by Montgomery Properties. Exclusive internal documents suggest coordinated city corruption. Claire's files, now verified and cross-checked, included memos, signatures, and emails detailing forced gentrification in multiple low-income neighborhoods. Properties were undervalued, residents pushed out quietly, and land flipped for luxury development under shell companies. It wasn't just Briarwood, it was a blueprint. By week's end, protests surrounded Montgomery headquarters. Former employees stepped forward, as did displaced families. City council members who had quietly backed Montgomery's initiatives scrambled to explain themselves. Under pressure, William Montgomery held a press conference. He stood in front of American flags, flanked by lawyers, his tie slightly askew, the first visible crack in his polished image. With cameras rolling, he cleared his throat and announced his resignation. In the interest of public trust, he called the allegations deeply disturbing, promised cooperation, but gave no apology. Claire watched it from Luke's couch, Jacob leaning against her, his cast covered in doodles and lightning bolts. She didn't cheer, didn't smile. She simply said, "He never thought I'd follow through." Luke handed her a cup of tea. "You did more than follow through," he said. "You stopped him." Claire shook her head. "We stopped him." Word of her identity spread fast. The media painted her as a rebel heiress, a reverse Cinderella, who gave up a palace for a porch. Reporters camped outside the house for 2 days. Claire refused interviews, and so did Luke. They kept their lives small, quiet, and close. What surprised them was the neighborhood. It rallied. Mrs. Cortez stood guard on the porch with a broom, shooing away strangers. Pastor Rick brought chili and told reporters to respect real courage. Kids from Jacob's school left drawings in the mailbox that read, "Thank you, Miss Claire." One morning, taped to the front door was a handwritten sign. This house made history, but more importantly, it made a family. Luke stared at it a long time. Claire didn't return to her old life. There were lawyers, of course, estate advisors, board members, all urging her to reconsider. She had rights to shares, dividends, land. They offered settlements, control, and silence. She declined them all. "I don't need power," she said one evening, helping Luke hang laundry in the backyard. "I just need peace." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The warmth between them was no longer unspoken, just unhurried, a closeness born of shared struggle, daily grace, the slow stitching of trust where something once torn had begun to heal. Jacob still called them both by name. But sometimes when Claire tucked his blanket or helped with math, he whispered, "Good night, Mom," and she would kiss his forehead without correcting him. It wasn't the world she'd been born into, but it was the one she chose. And for the first time in her life, it was enough. 1 year later, the little house on Pineview Lane still looked the same from the outside: white siding, creaky porch, and a sun-faded welcome mat. But inside, everything had changed. The walls were painted in soft, warm tones. A new couch filled the living room, but Jacob's old, scratched-up coffee table remained. The window that once held a "room for rent" sign now displayed a handmade garland of paper hearts and cranes. By the kitchen doorway, where Jacob had marked his height in pencil, hung the original rental receipt, laminated and pinned, "Claire Montgomery, $100 sellers paid in full." Luke never took it down. "This was the start of everything," he said. "Feels wrong to pretend it didn't matter." Claire now worked part-time at the Briarwood Art Center, teaching drawing to children who once lived in the neighborhood her father tried to erase. Most mornings, she walked there with Jacob skipping beside her, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. She no longer used her last name. To the town, she was just Claire, the one who baked cookies for council meetings, helped paint murals and read to first graders, even when she was off duty. Jacob still called her Miss Claire in public, but at home she packed his lunch, folded his socks, and kissed his forehead goodnight. He looked at her like kids do when they feel completely safe. She and Luke never announced anything, no ring, no titles. But the way she took his coat without asking, or how he brewed her coffee just right, said it all. Their love was quiet, steady, the kind that doesn't need to be declared to be real. That spring, the city hosted a ribbon cutting for a new low-income housing complex built on the grounds of the old Briarwood Center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home for dozens of families funded by grant settlements and a donation from an anonymous source. The mayor gave a short speech, then invited Claire to the stage. She wore a simple blue dress, the one from her mother's memorial, and her hair was tied back with a ribbon Jacob had picked out. She brought no speech, just 3 small items. First, the laminated receipt. "This was the moment I stopped being someone's daughter and became my own person." Next, a wooden key Jacob had carved in art class, the word home, etched in crooked letters. "The first key I ever received that opened something real." Finally, she unfolded a note, a letter from Luke left under her tea mug the morning after Jacob's accident. She read it aloud. "If you choose to go back to that world, I'll understand. But if you choose to stay, I'll build one more room onto this house, not because I need a tenant, but because this home isn't full unless it has you in it." Her voice caught, but she smiled the same soft smile she wore the night Luke first opened his door to her in the rain. "I used to have everything," she said, "but not a home, not a family. Now I don't have a name anyone cares about, and I've never felt richer." Applause followed. Jacob ran up and hugged her around the waist. That night, with Jacob asleep upstairs and the dishes done, Claire stood drying her hands at the sink. Luke came up behind her, pulled out a chair, and placed something on the table. A paper ring folded from waxed paper, the exact spiral she once taught Jacob to make. She raised an eyebrow. "Is this an ambush?" Luke smiled. "It's not gold, no diamonds." No, he said. "Just paper, but it'll never tear. As long as I'm the one holding it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You know why this is perfect," she whispered. "Why? Because you know how to hold something fragile without breaking it." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had always belonged there. No altar, no audience, just a man, a woman, and a boy upstairs. A family built not by blood but by choice. She had once been a princess in a house of marble. Now she was a mother, a teacher, a partner. And the only kingdom that mattered was this house made of grilled cheese, bedtime stories, and quiet courage. All it cost was $100 and the bravery to stay. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more tales that heal, inspire, and stay with you. Hit the like button if you believe that sometimes the smallest acts, like opening a door or folding a paper ring, can change a life forever. Here we share stories of love, courage, and the families we choose. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and we'll see you in the next soul-stirring story.